Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and it is that time of the month again. We just got ourselves a brand new faction, and this one is extremely noteworthy in pretty much every single way. The least relevant part about it is that it's associated with Glacial Peak, so you'll be able to get some more stars on a Glacial Peaks. I believe it reaches 13, I just don't have some of them upgraded because I was so low on shards. But as far as this faction, it has a insanely good layout. It kind of reminds me of Hall of Guardians, except it basically forces you to have to do the right path. You basically have it so you take the two bigger rooms, and then you can take all of the side rooms. And these side rooms are, I believe, guaranteed treasure rooms. If not guaranteed, they are very, very, very high chance. Because on both the battles that we have right now, they have been treasure rooms every single time. So I'm pretty sure this is a 4 treasure room delve with 2 5s, and a 4 in the middle, which is pretty much the max amount of loot you could ever really pack into a delve. A little bit of a different format than that of City of Thieves, but overall loot, I believe, is actually better than City of Thieves, with the only assumption being that if you are not running a gold team. One slight issue that this delve layout does have, from a loot perspective, if you're going to be grinding this at just level 20 and just permanently keeping it at level 20, one thing to keep in mind that might actually make this overall less loot than City of Thieves is the fact that whenever there is a Cedric in play, which there generally is going to be, you have to go out of your room a few rooms, similar to how you had to in Warren's, in order to go and get the treasure room. So unlike City of Thieves, where you'd be able to go immediately into it, you unfortunately have to go several rooms, and then you have Cedric's a bonus gold. And this might overall reduce the amount of gold that you get per delve, making it technically less gold per delve, but still, 4 guaranteed treasure rooms definitely makes it really solid. And the way that you have to do the delve just naturally ends up making you so you have to go do the correct order anyway. So you do 1 4, the 2 5s, and then you take out treasure rooms in whatever order, generally from highest to lowest as far as multiplier. So we take these, that, and then finish with Cedric. Or if we know we're using a gold-related team, we rush directly to the Cedric and then go in multiplier order, depending on which way you want to go about it to utilize your loot. But, of course, multiplier order always if you're just going for the leaderboard during the event. As far as the troops that we ended up getting here, though, that's probably the most relevant part. Every single one of these is probably a video on their own, or at least 2 of them anyways. But we got some really interesting troops that ended up getting utilized, or we'll be able to utilize as of this update right here, of this faction coming out. So, Copycat, this is mostly just going to be used for the faction itself, for doing pure faction and pretty much no other purpose. It creates 10 gems of an ally's mana color, and there's a 50% chance that it'll summon a copy of that ally. Pretty okay mana generator. Obviously, if you have the option to use literally anything, there's much better mana generators out there. But for the faction itself, it's not too bad. It also has a Jinx as well as a Air Link, which will help feed mana to your allies. Now, Doppelganger. This is by far, not from a faction perspective the most interesting, but just in general as a troop. This has the capability of transforming into an enemy at 100% chance. This basically means you can now copy any enemy off of any team that you ever want. So now if you want to test legends or mythics that you don't own, you can simply just find that troop in PvP, go and use a doppelganger to go and copy it, and then boom, there you go. You now have that onto your team. So you could basically go and let's say you want to test Ketris the Bull because you don't have it and you want to test it with a bunch of boost ratio, like Earth's Fury and such with them. So you go and build the team, except instead of putting Ketris the Bull, since you don't own it, you just put the doppelganger there, and boom, you just go copy an enemy's Ketris the Bull, and then for that battle you get to test it. So you can basically test troops that you don't own prior to actually owning them, at least to some degree, which prior to this has not been possible. So it'd be pretty interesting to see how that will end up panning out. So now you can consistently do that to your heart's content. As far as actually using it for battle, it's not going to be that useful of a troop, but it's a nice kind of testing troop, if nothing else, just to mess around with. And from an early game perspective, when you don't have as many higher rarity options, it's a good thing to basically artificially give you higher rarity options. Other than that, Glass Golem, pretty much just a standard Golem. This is just for Reflect instead of any other mechanic. So it's just an easy way to go do 100% chance to Reflect, which of course is now added into the game as of this faction. So if you end up hitting 4 skulls, your whole entire team will be guaranteed reflected. Do keep in mind that you have some amount of reflects on your team, and you don't end up getting enough equal to the amount on your team, you are not going to reflect everything, and that you might possibly reflect things that already have reflect. So for example, if you have a team of 4, you currently have 2 reflects, you go for a triple reflect, there's a possibility that 2 of those 3 reflects that you end up getting off the golem will end up hitting things that already have it. However, whenever you do 4 skulls, you will guarantee get your entire team reflected, or however many your entire team is. So if you have 3, obviously taking 3 skulls would reflect your entire team. Other than that, he does have 25% skull reduction. Really wish he would have had 50%, would have made him a little bit of a better tank. Of course, that does stack with the other 25%, though it's not the full effect. It's not 50%, it's like 37.5 or somewhere around there, is how much skull reduction you'll actually get between the two 25%. But still, nonetheless, he's an okay tank, not really going to be too good for. He only ends up gaining armor, which isn't really going to get you too far, since armor, of course, is the worst stat. And he has immune to mana drain, which won't really come into handy that much, but it'll help a little bit. But okay tank. It's mostly just going to be used, obviously, for its reflect. But the other pretty interesting thing is the Mare Queen. So this is probably not going to be used too much outside of Pure Faction. However, this is the main thing you're going to be using to get Pure Faction done, and it is the main troop you're going to be using if you ever want to use a Reflect mechanic. Reflect mechanic's really situational, but still something to consider. As far as Reflect, I never even mentioned what it does. It is a effect that ended up coming in a couple months ago. And it's pretty underused. It's because until today, there hasn't been any option that has a 100% chance of placing Reflect, but now there is, obviously. So basically what Reflect does is it reflects back 50% of the damage that you end up taking whenever you end up taking damage. So if something hits you for 100, you'll reflect back 50. Some properties to note about this is that it won't instant kill back on things like Devour. It will instant kill back on anything that has like Armor Tier or anything that does quote-unquote infinite damage. It will reflect back basically infinite damage back to them whenever you end up doing that. So stuff like Armor Tier and such, that it tears infinite armor, will do infinite damage back on Reflect, at least currently. And it won't end up triggering on Devour, though, because Devour is its own mechanic. It will not trigger on things like stas effects, so like Burn, Poison, Bleed, stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much all the properties. Oh, and it will not reflect if you have barrier. It'll instead take up the barrier charge, and then the next time you get hit, it'll end up doing the reflect. But overall, pretty nice mechanic, mostly used against AoE troops or anything that hits multiple enemies. It's also a great way to try to counter things that can't be countered by Submerge, but do end up hitting all things. So these are things like Catches the Bull, Infernus, any of the Infernus-like troops. These are kind of troops that can basically bypass the whole Submerge thing. However, Reflect will still work on them because they're still doing damage to it. So it's a good way to try countering them if you're lacking options for doing so, if you're still finding them to be a bit annoying. So, yeah, be interesting to see how this ends up panning out. It's obviously only exclusively really going to be used for its Reflect. It does a little bit of damage with its poke, but it's pretty minuscule. It does get boost ratio based on Reflect, but again, also pretty minuscule how much damage it does. And the other pretty noteworthy thing is it does have a 50% chance to summon a copy of the enemy. So again, if you're a newer player, or if you just want to copy higher rarity things from the enemy, or if there's a really specific troop that you might want to copy for your team composition, if you've already taken out a loss from your team, you can end up going and attacking with this troop, and there'll be a 50% chance that you'll go and summon whatever you just hit. So if you end up hitting onto something like a Gorgolfa and you just lost your tank, well, boom, you just summoned another Gorgolfa at a 50% chance if you end up poking it with this ability. So a lot of different ways that you can end up using it. It feels like it's going to be very, very situational, though, just because it's only going to be used for primarily its Reflect. But still, great utility to have, and be interesting to see how it pans out. So basically, the main two most noteworthy things are going to be Doppelganger and Mare Queen, as far as outside of Delves are concerned. Other than that, I guess we'll go into teams immediately then. So there are a lot of teams I want to go show real quick, basically for every single kind of range for this faction. So, and all these will be in the description below if you want to go and copy paste them. So first off, level 20 to 200, just the earlier level stages. You can end up running Arceus Shields, Harpy Mage, Rowan, and Possessed King. Unfortunately, we do not have access to Leprechaun and such. However, there is a cheaper team that I'll be showing in a moment that is around the same premise. But, of course, the whole premise is Arceus Shield into Rowan. Do this until you have enough damage to kill. Harpy Mage is all your mana generation, and then kill with Rowan. Possessed King is mostly just there for the additional amount of mana accumulation. And obviously at the really low levels, like 20 to 50, you might even want to run something completely different. Just a little bit quicker, like maybe some Truffles or something. Just because at the really, really low level range, due to this lacking something like Leprechaun, it is going to be a little bit slower. Like if you're running specifically level 20. But overall, it's still going to be pretty nice, and obviously with the Urskea Shield, you can upscale it all the way to 200 or so. You could probably get away with upscaling it a little bit further than that, but after that point, I feel like there'd be better options out there. As far as a lower level option for this, it's the exact same premise, except you can put Azura there. Azura you get for free from completing out the Merlantis Kingdom. Also, if you don't already have it, Rowan you get for free for completing out Forest of Thorns, so you can pretty much get this entire team for free. Urskea Shield is from 250 wins on Sentinel hero class, and aside from that, Harpy Mage you can just easily get by throwing shards at the Stonesong Aerie. To get a couple portals, you'd probably get it in less than 200 most likely. So really easy team to end up obtaining, and you just throw the banner to a combination of Rowan and Azura, using Azura as a mana accumulation. It would technically be stronger overall if Azura was in front of your Rowan, however there are a lot of things that can end up hitting last slots, so you generally don't want to do that, and third slot is still the safest location where you could ever put a troop into your team, and given that we want to make sure Rowan does not get hit, that is where we're going to want to put her. So that's all the low-level teams. Let's go over now to the ones that will actually get you through the entirety of the Delve. First off, just a standard High King Iron Gut. High King Iron Gut, obviously insanely good in Delves. That hasn't changed. He's still pretty much the best strip in the entire game as far as high-level delving is concerned. Here we just have a Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, High King Iron Guts, and a Mirage Queen. Whole purpose is, of course, is to Apothecary. Use that as cleanse. You get all your mana for your Mountain Crusher and High King Iron Gut. You then keep spamming High King Iron Gut until you win. If they have anything that has immune to Devour, you just simply use Mirage Queen in order to curse them, which will remove their immune to Devour. And you just keep spamming your mana between Mountain Crusher and Apothecary, and High King Iron Gut just wipes everything. As far as a mid-range team that doesn't use any mythics, of course, we have Truffles. This can also be used at the very low-level range if you want, but it can also be used to get all the way to the end of 500. This is just Mountain Crusher with double Truffle with a Mirage Queen. I'm using this with Sentinel. Main reason for this is we have Dispel. We also have a lot of skull reduction, so if you're using this at high level ranges, you're generally not going to die, because not only do you have Barrier every brown, you also have 40% skull reduction. You also have 3 additional stats, and between all that and the extra barriers for your team, you're pretty much never going to die with your Sentinel. For the most part, obviously it's still possible to die, it's just a lot less likely, and that will help tank it out. Other than that, for the rest of your team, you just go and keep spamming Truffles until you win. And you have Mirage Queen in case you need a curse option for whatever reason, and mostly just so you can get Skull Spam onto all the greens that you end up getting off of the Truffle. So it ends up working out pretty nice, and you can just clear through everything. And you could basically use that at any level range that you might want to do. Also, the other thing I forgot to mention, magic. This is particularly good the more magic medals you have. Currently, I only have +4. I know most people don't have +12 yet. But if you do have +12, this is probably the best thing you could ever run for any Delve or similar teams related to this competition, just because Truffles gain an insanely high amount of value from having additional magic, and being able to do that so easily definitely helps out a lot off of the medals. And other than that, something extremely cheap that you can end up running for this Delve, if you're looking to get it completed, but you have absolutely no option whatsoever. That is Mang, Apothecary, Cockatrice, and Dragonian Monk. This team is super cheap, using only ultra rares and below. Mang, of course, is just set to Titan. For this one team, you are going to want to go and put Enrage onto this. I currently have them all set to Explosion, but this is one that you would specifically want to go on Enrage, so you can go and hit through their any kind of reductions they have, like Stone Skin or anything, as well as being able to go and do 1.5 times damage. But of course, Mang just eliminates armor, gains a bunch of attack, and does a little bit of poke damage just to get rid of any barrier that they might have if they so have it. You also have Dispel off of this, which you'll, or not Dispel, sorry, but you'll be able to use Enrage to hit through any of their traits. You have Apothecary to feed Brown, similar to the other team, except this time you're not really feeding a mana generator, you're feeding more so your damage output. Once you do end up getting past the Mang though, and you've already casted Mang to a point where you feel like you have enough damage, you can then start using your utility troops. Cockatrice is here as a hard disable, so you don't take any damage. Of course, earlier on in the game, you'll have lower stats, and with lower stats means easier to die, so you generally want the enemy having no damage. With Cockatrice, you can entangle enemies so they have 0 attack. You can also mana drain them so they can't cast, basically making it so you can end up disabling every single possible thing that can do damage to you. Cockatrice is an insanely good troop, and it ends up creating Browns, which will feed into everything except your Apothecary. It also has a +1 yellow attached, so you'll just be able to get it right into it. Other than that, Dragonian Monk, you could go for a different option, more offensively like a Bullet or something like that. However, Dragonian Monk is the safe option, has 50% mana start. The whole purpose of this is just to barrier your team. It's basically a backup for when Cockatrice isn't enough to constantly keep disabling the enemy team, or if they have immune to Entangle or immune to Mana Drain as such. The Dragonian Monk is to pick up that slack by giving you barriers, which will help protect you from any kind of instance of damage. This is more so to protect your other 3 troops than your hero, because obviously your hero can simply get those barriers off of Brown. But it's mostly to make sure that your other 3 don't die, or Apothecary the Cockatrice, and of course Draconian Monk himself by providing those additional barriers. And other than that, of course, we have Pure Faction. Pure Faction, I almost feel like I need to cover in its own video, just because Pure Faction is so ridiculously weird. The faction team you see right here is actually not the faction team you're going to be using. This is the team you're going to be using in that you'll start with this team. However, you'll be finishing with a team that looks so drastically different than this. And the main reason for this is level 500 Pure Faction, or any Pure Faction for that matter in this delve, but particularly level 500, is basically just going to be you replacing, looking at the delve, looking at what the strongest troops are in the delve, going and copying them and making your entire team composition based on those strong troops, and then going from there. So basically, Glass Golem is going to die. You're just going to be using this initial team with one of each, just so you get a little bit of bonuses so you can survive the first battle. After the first battle of a delve in Pure Faction, what you're going to do is look at the delve and figure out where on earth the better troops are, like things like Instant Kill, Devour, stuff like that. You then are going to want to go and basically have your Glass Golem die, have your Doppelganger get something that will be good in second slot, get your Mirror Queen to go and hit something that will go and summon a good first slot, and then boom, there's your team. A good first slot that you copied from the enemy using Mirrored Queen, a good second slot that you copied using the Doppelganger on whatever looked interesting on the enemy team, either an instant kill or something, a Copycat, which will be your mana accumulator option, and the Mirror Queen, which will just be your other summon option to get another troop, as well as your Reflect option after your Glass Golem, of course, has died. You can also end up doing this with the Copycat in front of the Doppelganger, depending on what options are within the delve. Like if there's a really good instant kill option, but it might end up dying easily if it was in second slot, obviously you could just put the Copycat at the beginning of the delve prior. But you're definitely going to need to scout out the delve and figure out what on earth you want to have your team be. You could theoretically, if you really want to, replace every single thing on your team except for Mirror Queen into opponent. So whatever you see on the enemy team, you could just end up keeping. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this delve ends up panning out, since there is a near infinite amount of teams that you can end up theoretically having as you go through this delve. So obviously you would want to take more so instant kill options and things that can upscale a bit easier. But still, overall, going to be a really interesting Pure Faction. Might be a little bit annoying to run, just because of the amount of options, but definitely the most unique Pure Faction I think we've ever seen in this game. And that is pretty much everything then. So if you guys still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Of course, all of these teams will be below too if you want to copy any of them. And we'll be streaming the faction over the next few days. So if you want to catch that, we'll be streaming today and tomorrow around noon Eastern Standard Time, as well as every night as we always do at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're also hopefully going to be setting up Mixer this weekend. So one of these streams we'll hopefully have over at Mixer, though it'll be both simultaneously on YouTube and Mixer. So if any of you prefer watching here, you'll be able to do so. But hopefully we'll have that set up by this weekend so we can start doing our first test stream just to see how it ends up panning out. Anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget, if you do want to keep this delve at level 20, it is a pretty good one to do so. I am personally going to be going down the route of just completing it because it seems like a really fun one. Like I mentioned, probably one of the most creative ones we've had so far from a delve perspective. But yeah, it is still a great farming faction, so if you want to keep it at level 20, feel free to do so. If you already have a level 20, City of Thieves is still perfectly fine. There's no point if you already have City of Thieves to basically give it up just to go to this one. I'd probably just stick with City of Thieves. But yeah, if you don't have one yet, this is a pretty good one to go for. And that's that. I'll catch you all later. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and best of luck with the delve. Goodbye, everyone!